we're very serious about the business, but we're not serious about ourselves, if that makes sense. Sales is not about, that one big deal. The higher you are in the organization, the greater the shadow.
All right, Liam, welcome to the Sound of Sales today.
Thank you, Brian, and appreciate the invite to participate.
If I would call up your children right now and I ask them what their dad does for a living, what would they reply to me?
Yeah, it's a good question. They'd probably tell you that I lead sales teams at LinkedIn. Beyond that, I don't think they actually that's not entirely true. I do have one of my kids who she's working in tech, and she was working in tech as a marketing manager, and so she knows what I do because she was using LinkedIn and LinkedIn Sales Navigator at the company that she was working at. Okay, so she has a little bit more understanding of what we do at LinkedIn than the other four kids. So yeah, it's funny when I used to work for Dell, when I used to work for Fujitsu Siemens, and my kids were much smaller. When people used to ask them what their dad did, they say, "Well, he fixes computers," right? So they've evolved on from that as they've gotten older.
Yeah, yeah, and I think once you're in marketing or sales, everyone knows the LinkedIn sales solutions, of course, with the most well known being Sales Navigator, I would say. Um, how did you get to LinkedIn?
Wow, through a very long journey that started in 1985. I left secondary school or high school, as our American friends would call it, in 1985. I initially had been thinking about going to college to study computer science. Actually, when I was 16, I wrote two computer programs, video games that I managed to sell to a software company back then that was based on the days of the Sinclair Spectrum and the Auric Atmos and those types of devices. And that market actually imploded as Sega and Nintendo launched the
Mhm.
consoles where to play a video game. You just stuck in a cartridge instead of having to wait 35 or 40 minutes for a cassette tape to load up. Those people who are watching this and don't know what a cassette tape is, ask your parents, right? So the but that whole industry changed. And actually, as I was getting ready to leave high school, I had been doing some part-time work with one of Ireland's leading supermarket chains. They offered me a job as a training manager, which I did for 3 years. Got a huge amount of experience. I did night school as part of that twice a week, and learned about HR, learned about management, learned about retail and legal and all that sort of stuff. But 3 years into that, through a friend of mine, I got an opportunity to get into sales. And my first sales job actually was in Germany, selling cars to American military personnel. And from there, I came back to Ireland in 1991, got involved working for Canon. So now I was in the B2B world, and I've been in the B2B sales world since then. And worked for Canon as a rep, worked for Panasonic as a rep a couple of years later, and then in 1999 I joined Siemens as a sales manager for their channel sales business. So because when I went from Canon to Panasonic, I went from direct sales to channel enabled sales, and then that facilitated me getting a job as a manager with Siemens a couple of years later. I also worked for Brother for a couple of years, and that sort of was what I would say the beginning of me getting into the IT space. So I went from Siemens, the division that I worked for in Siemens. It was the computer and server and all that sort of mainframe part of the business, and that morphed very quickly into a company that was called Fujitsu Siemens. That was 50% owned by Fujitsu, 50% owned by Siemens, and I was there for 11 years and started as the channel sales manager, and I finished as the managing director. And then from there, I went to lead sales and marketing at an Irish company. That was just for 2 years. It was a very interesting exercise. There's a company called PFH Technology, one of the larger IT and systems integration companies in Ireland. From there to Dell. I was at Dell for 5 years, and then just over 6.5 years ago, LinkedIn approached me for the role that I have today, which is leading the sales solutions business in EMEA and LATAM. So there's like 37 years of work history in a flash.
Yeah, indeed. It's quite a growth curve. It's something I think some people can't wrap their head around it. That at some point LinkedIn knocks your door and says, "I want you." What does that do? Is it still special that one of the largest companies in the world? Of course, you were also working at another large company, but what does it do to you as a person when that email, or how did they approach you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a member of LinkedIn since about 2006, I believe. So, a couple of years after LinkedIn started, I got introduced to LinkedIn by my very first connection on LinkedIn is a gentleman called David Sibley. He's now retired, but he was running a company called People Achieving, I think the name of the company was. And they did some work with us at Fujitsu Siemens about enterprise account management, enterprise acquisition strategies. And as part of that, Dave introduced me to LinkedIn, and LinkedIn at that point had 3.5 million members, I believe, globally, and now it's over 850 million. And so when LinkedIn approached me, I would say I had a peripheral knowledge of the specific products at LinkedIn. But LinkedIn had played a strong part in the success of my teams at Dell and at PFH Technology, and also at Fujitsu Siemens. And really, from my perspective, Bram, it was about what is it that LinkedIn wanted me to do. And at that moment in time, the Sales Solutions business was pretty successful. It had an initial virality and land and expand strategy, but was at that tipping point of needing to have a bit more structure and a bit more enterprise sales, as pivoting from selling to managers and directors who would buy for their team to looking at enterprise-wide sales. And the process of LinkedIn talking to me and LinkedIn deciding to do something together was around about 5.5 months, and really getting a real understanding of was I the right person for LinkedIn, but equally as well, was LinkedIn the right vehicle for me. What appealed greatly about that role was that the business was about elevating the sales profession and making sales more professional, and that's something that I've been quite passionate about throughout my career. Is that it is interesting that sales has been for me an extremely rewarding career, and as it has been for many of my friends and colleagues over the years. However, I think it's more of a European thing that people are not necessarily overtly proud to say I'm in sales. Right? Yeah. It's I often think about when parents are talking about what their children are doing. The lady who has a son or a daughter that's a doctor is at the front of the queue to answer the question, "Oh, what are your kids doing these days?" Right? The person whose son or daughter is a sales director or a top rep at a company, I think it's not there. It's not there as a, hey, when I grow up, I want to be in sales. Okay, albeit
Hmm.
extremely rewarding, extremely professional careers, and also I think the reputation of sales. In some categorizations, there are some sales professions that have a negative connotation. Often hear people talking in a derogatory manner about, that person's a used car salesperson, right? And so for me, in terms of having an opportunity to talk to other business leaders and sales leaders about how we can continually push the professionalism, the quality of outreach. I was pretty excited by that, and that for me was the thing that got me to resign from a job at Dell, where I was extremely happy. I spent 5 of the best years of my career during my time at Dell. It was a difficult thing for me to do, to leave that job, because I loved working for Dell. But I also, I bought into the vision that Mike Derrison, who hired me into LinkedIn, had, which was that as LinkedIn is, connecting the world's professionals and creating economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce, that what we were doing as part of that was making salespeople more productive and successful, but also at the same time elevating the sales profession and allowing people to have a better approach to their customers, which suited the customer, but also was just a more professional way to do that. So that's what I went through when LinkedIn reached out to me, and we spent 5 months talking about joining.
That's pretty cool. Well, if you look back to when you first started and now, what would you say was your biggest impact on the business?
Yeah, I think the biggest impact that I believe I've had on the business. We've in the 6 years I've worked for Sales Solutions, we've 7x'd the business. I can about a year ago, coming up on a year ago. Microsoft, we're owned by Microsoft, and Amy Hood shared as part of one of the Microsoft quarterly calls that the Sales Solutions business in our fiscal year 21, so last year, we exceeded $1 billion in annual recurring revenue for that year. And there are very few SaaS-based businesses that have gotten to that level of annual recurring revenue. So part of my contribution to that is getting to a level where it's not about a bunch of super clever people. It is about clever people, but it's about having a systematic approach of what you're doing, and moving from selling to individuals at companies to selling to the organization, and focusing on organizational value. So really, putting in place, hey, what works for us, what works for customers, how do we do more of that, how do we make it repeatable, how do we make it scalable, as opposed to harnessing the energy of a sales team who just happen to all be doing individually great things. It's about harnessing that power, but making it in a way that it's standardized without being boring, and standardized without dampening down innovation, but at the same time focusing on fewer things to be done better, and making sure that those things are repeatable and, importantly, scalable.
So if I was about to ask you that, I have a team of 100,000 salespeople, and I want them to be great, but we're only allowed, or you're only allowed, to give them 3 guiding principles. And these can be anything. It can be philosophy or an idea, whatever you have in mind. But
Yeah.
we can only give them 3. What would the 3 principles be?
Yeah, I think it's some advice that I've given people over time is, there's actually 3 things that impact your performance. First of all, there's your motivation and your drive, right? So and the second thing is your skills and your knowledge, and the third thing is your activity. And as a salesperson, as a business, managing those 3 things in the right proportions will lead to your success. So, for example, you can have somebody who has a tremendous amount of product knowledge and market knowledge, who is extremely motivated, and therefore that enthusiasm is infectious.
Yeah.
But if they speak to 2 customers in a month, they're, it's,
Yeah, I
they're
get it.
not going to be successful. Okay. On the reverse of that, you can have somebody who's not so knowledgeable, not so skillful, who is equally motivated, and they see 100 customers a month. That person's going to get lucky. Now, so ideally, what you want is you want somebody who has the right level of skills and knowledge, who's highly motivated and driven, and uh, does the right level of activity, which will determine their success. And really, my advice I give to people is figure out what the key things are in each one of those boxes. Now, I've often said to people, hey, your motivation and drive, the company that you work for, the manager that you work for, plays a role in that. There's no point you coming to the office today or being in a remote situation and being, hey, I'm up for it today. And your first interaction with your manager takes the wind out of your sails. And so the company and your manager have a role in that. It's almost 50-50. When it comes to your skills and knowledge, that's also a cooperative thing. It's like, hey, the company and the manager you work for have a responsibility to improve your skills and knowledge, but equally, you've got to have a growth mindset, and you've got to have an approach which is, hey, I should always constantly be learning and improving my knowledge. But when it comes down to activity, 90% is on you, and 10% is on the company or the manager that you're working for. And the 10% is on the company and manager is for that company and that manager to be minimizing the amount of time that you're not doing stuff that's going to help you achieve your goals. And so not having unnecessary sales meetings every day or whatever the right cadence is, depending on different companies. But if companies and individuals focus on those 3 buckets or 3 areas and have those in the right proportion, then just success becomes inevitable.
I think the manager aspect in there is super important. You hear that from a lot of salespeople, that if the manager
Absolutely.
brings stress to the table, it infects everyone on the team.
Mhm.
How do you try to be the best manager possible to your team?
Yeah, I think it's about showing up as the person that needs to be in the room at the time. And that is that your depending on the higher you are in the organization, the greater the shadow that you cast on the organization. And also, I often say this to managers: is like, hey, imagine a scenario we're in the office, and I am sitting at my desk, looking like I'm, like in the worst pain in the world, and I'm clasping my head in my hands. Okay, now people are looking at me going, there must be something going on. The business must be in trouble. Like whereas if it's one of their colleagues, they'll walk over to them and say, hey, you okay? And it's like, oh yeah, I've like got this massive headache and I've had it all day. So therefore, everything that you do as a manager has a multiple of interpretations by people. So therefore, you have got to show up with intention. So if your intention is, hey, we need to be very serious about this topic. I need everybody's intention is that that's the intention. If it's work has to be fun, and therefore having that intention to go, it's fun when it's fun. We're serious when we're serious, and really trying to be as transparent as possible so that people are not filling in the blanks, and trying to read between the lines, even if it's not between the lines. And I think the whoever's leading a business or leading a division is important to the cultural zeitgeist of that team or that business. But the most important person is the individual manager that you report to. That's the person that is that last mile of motivation. That's that person where if you love working for the company that you work for, you are inspired by the CEO or by the divisional leader. But if you're not inspired by the person that you have to have one-to-ones with, that you are dependent on for individual coaching, you're going to leave that company. Right. And also you're not going to be at your best. And, when I think about my career, it's the people that I reported to at individual points in time made the difference to me, not the companies that I worked for, not the roles that I had. It was that the various people that I've worked for over the years have invested in me and invested in the relationship with me as a person on their team, right? And it's a critical difference.
Mm-hmm. If you look back to these people, what particular situation shaped you to be the leader that you are today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that there's I've worked for some incredibly phenomenal people, but the one that stands out for me in the arc of my career is that in around 2002, I got a new boss at Fujitsu Siemens Computers, and at the time I was the channel and consumer sales director. I think I had about 16 people working downstream of me in the two different parts of the business, and we were extremely successful. Like we were in the consumer business, we were number two behind Dell in Ireland. Our channel business, we were everything that could be green from a metrics perspective for that team, relative to our peers and the rest of EMEA. We were if we weren't number one, we were number two. Right, highly performant team. And I remember my new boss, a lady called Neve Spellman, sitting me down after her sort of 30, 60, 90-day observation thing and saying, hey, I've got some feedback for you. And here it comes. It was, with the way you manage, you have reached the pinnacle of your career. And for me, that was a little bit shocking because it was like, whoa, and if I'm honest about it, I was somewhat insulted by it because it was like, hey, I'm fantastic, right? Like, it's me, right? Look at what my team have done. We're great. Like, why are you giving me negative feedback on what we're doing? And she was very clear on what she meant, because I had a style of management back then, which was literally, she followed on saying, I could tell you were a computer programmer because your approach to management is the same as someone's approach to computing, right? And literally, my team would get instructions like this from me. It was like, do this. If this happens, do this. If this happens, then do this. And if this happens, do this, or this. And if this happens, come back to me, okay, for further instructions, right? And that literally was, and her point was that, hey, you're doing a great job of managing 16 people. It's somewhere between 12, 16, I can't remember the specifics. But if you need to manage 100 people, this is not going to work for you, because you don't have enough hours in the day to be able to punch card program your people. And also, your people won't do anything without coming to you for specific instructions. And what I would say is that, that for me, Bram, was the most important conversation that anybody had with me in the entirety of my career. Because what it meant was I needed to either accept that she was right and act on that. And had I not, I wouldn't have had all the jobs that I've had since then. And I certainly wouldn't be leading the Sales Solutions business for LinkedIn. And what that meant was that I had to literally go back and rebuild my approach to to management, because she was absolutely right. I was literally running out of hours in a day to be able to effectively tell people what to do. And so that was the moment that I flipped over from, hey, everybody needs to be like me. Everyone has to do it the way I would do it, because I was effectively using my team as an extension of me, right? Because and that was the wrong thing to do. But that's the conversation that changed the trajectory and changed the potential of the career that I've had since then, and I'm immensely grateful to Neve for that.
It's I think it's indeed it's harsh feedback to hear at first, but then if you come to think about it, the way that that person managed you tells a lot about what more people should hear nowadays as well. I think is not only the bad, the good, but the opportunity that is in there.
Yeah, I'm personally, have been for a long, long time. I'm a personal fan of direct, open, honest, and constructive feedback. And it is interesting. One of from a LinkedIn culture and values perspective, open, honest, and constructive is a strong value within LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. How many people today rely on you as a manager, as a leader?
Personally, I have 4 direct reports. We have close on 350 to 400 people across the sales solutions organization in EMEA. But I've three direct reports who lead sales divisions for me as part of the EMEA Latam business. So not a lot of individual reports. It has been as high as 5, but right now it's 3, and I feel 3 is the right number. But what I would say is that from I think hopefully talk to my team. I'm very much an accessible person for the entirety of the team. So if somebody wants to ping me on Teams or call me on my phone or whatever to have a quick 5-minute chat about a deal or a customer situation or a career conversation, etc., more than happy to get involved up and down the organization. So. And it is interesting, the thing you asked me, Ron, about impact. The thing I'm probably most happy about the impact of the arc of my career. I've literally had thousands of people who've worked with me over those years, and for me, what's great to see, like that channel sales team at Fujitsu Siemens, there's a number of people that worked on that team that are now leading. They're sales directors. They're leading businesses, managing in Neve's style, not in my original style. Hopefully, and hopefully they learn from the latter part of our interaction and not the early part of our interaction. And it's just to be able to see the impact that you've had on the careers of people throughout those years is great.
Yeah, and I think you're touching right now way more people, even though you have 3 direct reports. It's what they or what they bring across to the people they manage, basically. Because if you are doing a stressy job or not giving them the right feedback on what is happening, then that will circle down all the way, and you probably wouldn't be able to do the 7-figure or the multiplier that you did within those years.
Yeah, I think in terms of the if you look at how modern businesses operate versus how businesses operated in the 80s and 90s and way before that, is that very much the standard management approach in years gone by was very militaristic, right? It's command and control, right? It's that every level up had more information. It was about that phrase, information is power, and often there was information about the business that people wouldn't know about, and it was all about getting layers of permission. Whereas if you look at many organizations today, they're much more democratic. They're much more inclusive. Information is distributed evenly in the org. In fact, I would say that 99% of what I know about our business is available and also known by everybody who's in the business. So there's this thing of, leaders, keeping information from people, is, it's just not there. Obviously, person A and person B, they're not able to see their individual personnel records, which obviously I have access to, but or commission payments and things like that. But the information about the business, how we're performing, what we're planning to do, that is very, very democratized. And so today, leadership is not about command and control; it's about empowerment and scale. And therefore, my job is to empower my team, to make sure that they're empowering their teams, and to really lean into coaching versus direction. And there will be times that you have to be get into a direction phases. Hey, we're introducing a new product, and so everybody has to participate. Okay, as opposed to it being a buffet of choosing what to do. But in terms of how you structure and do your day-to-day job, as long as your inputs and outputs are consistent, then we want to empower you to do the best thing for you and for your customer.
That's super important as well. Now, pretty soon you're going to leave this ship, LinkedIn heaven, as it may sound. If I would call up one of your 3 reports after you left, and I asked them, what was Liam good at for you? What would you hope or think they would say to me?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I think there's 2 things that that I add some value on to my direct reports. First is that having very honest conversations with them about calling things as they are. Hey, this is what this looks like. What are we gonna do about it? And not beating around the bush when it comes to giving constructive feedback. And the second thing is ensuring that we don't take ourselves too seriously. Right? Is that getting we're very serious about the business, but we're not serious about ourselves, if that makes sense. So so making sure that, hey, there are very few situations in a work context where you can't bring some amount of levity or humor to the situation. Even if it's a difficult situation, it's a difficult customer situation. We shouldn't get to a point where we get so serious that it's bringing stress into people's jobs. And I often say, hey, there are truly stressful jobs. At the end of the day, we may feel under stress, but if something doesn't happen at LinkedIn, nobody dies. Nobody gets hurt. It's and therefore, our business is serious, but let's keep it in context as well. I'm flying to the UK tomorrow. I want the air traffic controllers to do a really good job between Ireland and Scotland. Because if they don't do their job, serious things happen. Okay, but it's really, I think, being open, honest, and constructive, and having some fun whilst being serious about the business.
Yeah, what you said about the stress is, I think, something you learn to deal with over the years. I think if a new account executive or a new rep starts at LinkedIn, coming from I don't know where, they might feel this seriousness, like I'm stepping into a big organization. There's going to be a heavy load on my shoulders, and it impacts, I think, their work, their mental health, their feeling. How do you make sure that the upper management or these leaders that they can take away that seriousness?
Yeah, I think it's. I suppose there's a couple of things. One is that the the fear, fear of failure, fear of lots of different things. Um, it's almost a self-perpetuating um, prophecy. If you are concerned that you're not going to be successful, and you spend all your time worrying about not being successful, it's going to come true. It's the same reason why, if in this room I had to walk from, like it's 18 feet wide, if I had to walk from one end of the room to the other end of the room within a 30 centimeter band, I could do that all day, every day. If you then took me to the top of the Empire State Building in New York and said, now all you have to got to do is walk across this like 30 centimeter space, you wouldn't be able to, the fear of doing that. Well, certainly for me, I would not, would not be a positive experience for me. But it's taking and dealing with that fear in context, and that is, if I'm not able to do that here, there's no consequence. If I'm not able to do it in the Empire State Building, there's a massive consequence. And I think it's putting the consequence then into context. So if you are working for a company and you are doing your best and it doesn't work out, then hey, that doesn't mean that you're a failure. It means that's not the right environment for you. That there's an environment for everybody. Everybody has greatness in them. They just need to find their place. They need to find their thing. And so I think, the advice I would give people early in career is, find the thing that you can do, and keep all the stress and keep all that consequence in perspective. It's about the perspective of what's the jeopardy. I think with sales, Bram, it's got the potential to be hugely rewarding, but it does come with the stress of the unknown, right? It's and therefore, but you need to accept that as it's part of the environment. And if you can do that, if you're in sales and you are absolutely paralyzed by fear and anxiety, maybe sales is not your thing. Maybe you need to find something that's a little bit more, hey, you have a defined input, a defined output as a result of that, and therefore you're not feeling that uncertainty. And I think that's reflected in the opportunity, the earning opportunity that a sales career offers people, is that it's generally in most organizations that I've worked for in 37 years, the salespeople will be some of the highest paid salespeople at the company. Even if that's an engineering company or it's a product company or it's a software company, you typically get that the sales community are amongst the higher earners in those companies.
Yeah, and I think that's where the stress sometimes comes from with newcomers, is that there's a high reward, and that brings again the stress with it, because in sales you have to, people often, like you said in the beginning, they often think diminifying about it, because everyone can do it, everyone can, but it's not the case. You often need a certain amount of skills, a certain amount of skill set, how to craft your emails, how to do cold calling, like all that stuff, which brings extra stress in the situation where there's a quota above your head.
Yeah, look, I think it's like anything in life. It's I'd love to be able to play the piano. I'd love to be able to play the guitar. I'd be much cooler if I could do either of those two things. But I don't actually have musical aptitude. And it is because I've tried both of those things. It's terrible, right? And as for singing, I definitely can't sing. So that's not my thing. So you have to have a core natural aptitude, and then on top of that, you can build the skills, the knowledge. You can, like I didn't come out of high school knowing how to structure an account plan or a pursuit plan for a large enterprise company. I know how to do that now. Because I've received training, and people have opened my mind in terms of a process and methodology, etc. But you need the natural aptitude, and if you have the natural aptitude, the stress should become secondary, because um, it's a process. Like right now, I can advise somebody that, hey, to be successful doing a specific job at LinkedIn Sales Solutions, here's how you need to be thinking about the sort of pipeline you need to be generating, the conversations you need to have with your customer, the knowledge that you have around our products and our services. And if you have that knowledge, you bring it to your customer, you do the right level of activity, then success becomes inevitable. But you have to do all of those things. Sales is not about that one big deal. It's great when people win a large deal, an expansion with an existing customer or a new customer, but often it's the process, run rate driven activities that you need to do, and if you're not doing them, you're not going to be rewarded by your customer, because you're not it's a process. And therefore, if you extrapolate that, it's no different to if your job was working in a warehouse and you have to move boxes from a production line into the back of a truck. There's a way of doing it. There's a certain amount of them that you need to move every day in order to be deemed successful. It's really breaking it down into, if you're doing the right things, if you've got the right skills and knowledge, you've got the right motivation, and your company is offering value to the customers that it's trying to serve, success becomes inevitable.
In all those years that you managed people, and you've seen a lot of them, what do you think is the biggest difference there between that 1% of salespeople and the B plus players?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about people who uh, put themselves last in the pecking order. And what I mean by that is that the first people they think about is their customer. Is this going to be valuable for the customer? Is it going to be valuable for, is that customer going to be a valuable customer for the organization you're working for? Is there a fit there? And then don't really think about themselves at all. And and therefore, it's almost, I know, sixth sense, like from a customer, is like, hey, this person's not interested in just selling to me. This person's interested in helping me with my business. And I encourage people that if you have a customer that is willing to buy something that you don't believe they're going to get real value from, tell them, hey, I get that you want to buy this, but is this the right thing for you to do right now? And that could be the customer's excited about doing something, but they don't have the right structure in place internally to roll that out. So they're going to buy it. It's not going to be successful. And then whether you like it or not, that has an impact on your long-term relationship with that person. You'd be much better off saying, hey, right now, I don't believe you're ready for this. I think that the right environment for you to procure the service or the software or whatever, you're going to need to have a rollout plan. You're going to need to have somebody at your organization who's responsible for this program. You're going to need to have, et cetera, et cetera. And then therefore, I don't want to sell this to you today. What I want to do is I want you to be my customer on this for the next 10 years, the next 15 years, whatever that period is. And therefore, I can't remember who it was. I need to look this up. I remember, back in the 90s hearing that there was a general manager of General Motors in the US who sometime, I think in the 50s or 60s or 70s, whatever it was, said something along the lines of that we shouldn't be interested in selling a car to somebody today. We should be interested in selling them the 15 cars that they're going to own in their lifetime. right? And it's thinking about, do you want a now relationship with your customers, or do you want a long-term relationship with your customers? And I think that, for me, that's panned out. I have people that I deal with today on behalf of LinkedIn that I have a 20-year relationship with in my career. And therefore, having those interactions that are repeatable and scalable are important. So always put the customer first. Always do things that are a win-win for your customer and your company. And then you don't have to worry about anything else that comes from that, because if you're doing those two things, that's going to make the difference. Salespeople who put themselves first may win in the short term, may be more successful in the short term, but those people, in my experience, are not successful in a medium to long term.
It's recognizable, I think, in a lot of industries as well. If you go to a sports car dealership, for example, and you don't have the money to buy a sports car, they will still let you in and let you sit in the car, because they know at some point you might be able to buy this sports car. And if you have the vision that you want that car, you will do everything it takes to make it successful.
Absolutely.
If you look back to all your years, a totally honest question, like, what did you dislike being a sales leader?
What do I dislike in being a sales leader? I think I would say that what I dislike in sales is historical for me. When I started in sales, there was a lot of aggression. Like I would say, managing through fear was pretty active in the 80s and 90s. The Gordon Gekko years of greed is good, and negative competition between reps on the same team, the you better perform or you're getting fired energy, and really that sort of the command and control environments. And that was how things were done. And I'm really happy to say that in most organizations that's gone now. And what I say to salespeople that I come across that are not working for LinkedIn, and people who reach out to me for advice is like, hey, if you're a salesperson right now and you're in a command and control environment and your boss is managing through fear, here's my advice for you: leave. Because if you're a good salesperson, there are so many companies that you can work for right now where you will be nurtured, you will be valued, and you will not be living in a culture of fear. Go work for those companies, because and that's what I dislike the most, is that the management by fear is not nice to do. It's not nice to experience, and also it's now the least effective form of management that you can get on the planet.
True. Very true. Liam, we're nearing the end of the episode, so I have one more question for you, which is, if I could give you a billboard at the side of the road, there's nothing related to sales right now, it's just a billboard at the side of the road, and you could put anything on it, what would you put on that billboard?
I think that for me, to send a message to the most amount of people possible in different scenarios, I'd put, don't be afraid, it's probably not going to happen. And so many people worry about so many things that don't happen. And by the way, it's advice I constantly give to myself, right? Is that it is live in the now. If there's very few things that can happen to you that are totally disastrous, right? And clearly, if somebody's just being diagnosed with terminal cancer, that's a pretty thing. You should worry. You should worry about that. But putting things in context about, hey, life's too short to worry about. Are stress yourself out? Am I going to hit my quota this quarter? Am I going to do this? Is this going to happen? Because in reality, if you write down all of the things that you worry about, then go back and look at that list. The vast majority of the things that people spend cycles worrying about, they never happen. Mm-hmm. Or they do happen, and it's the best thing that ever happened to you. Okay, so and that's the other side. So live in the now. Don't worry. It's probably not going to happen.
And if it happens, it happens.
If it happens, it happens. Deal with things as they come along.
With these words, Liam, I would love to thank you for joining me on The Sound of Sales and sharing your insights on your career and how you roll things.
Thank you, Brian. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.